On a cold winter's day in Washington, D.C., Donald Trump walked unannounced into the United States Secret Service headquarters, causing a stir among the agents who were diligently working. The heavy doors swung open without warning, and the atmosphere shifted from routine to stunned silence. No one had been informed of his arrival, and agents exchanged puzzled glances as Trump stood at the entrance. His presence alone commanded attention. "Mr. Trump, what brings you here?" one of the agents finally asked, breaking the silence. Trump, his gaze sharp and unwavering, scanned the room before responding firmly, "I need to find someone, an agent who saved my life years ago. His name has been erased from every record, and I won't leave until I know the truth." His words hung in the air, thick with mystery. A Secret Service agent had once saved the life of the future president, but why was this hero's name completely wiped from history? It wasn't just a request. Trump's voice revealed a deep sense of urgency and determination. As the room remained tense, Jonathan Reyes, the director of the Secret Service, stepped forward, trying to gather the details. Trump began to speak of a night in 1982 when he was a young businessman in New York, unaware that a dangerous situation was unfolding around him. He had been ambushed by armed men who intended to end his life. Just as things seemed hopeless, a voice emerged from the darkness, and an undercover agent, whose name Trump didn't know, had stepped in, saving him at great personal risk. Yet, despite this miraculous rescue, the man disappeared without a trace, leaving Trump to search for him decades later. In 1982, Donald Trump was just a young, ambitious businessman, focused on expanding his empire. He had no idea that one fateful night in New York would forever change the course of his life. It started like any other evening. Trump had just finished an important meeting and was heading home. But what seemed like an ordinary night quickly took a dark turn. As he drove through a narrow alley, a black SUV suddenly swerved in front of his car, blocking his path. Before Trump could react, four armed men stepped out, their cold eyes locking onto him as they approached his vehicle. Trump, initially stunned, found himself pulled from his car and thrown to the ground. It wasn't a random act of violence. These men were part of a powerful underground organization in New York, a criminal syndicate controlling various industries in the city. At the time, Trump had no idea who they were, or that he had unknowingly stepped into their territory. The group's intentions were clear. They wanted to teach him a lesson or, if necessary, silence him forever. As the leader of the group pressed a gun to Trump's head, the tension in the air was thick with danger. Trump's heart raced as the man sneered, "You think you can walk into our world without paying the price?" The cold steel of the gun barrel sent a chill down Trump's spine. But just as Trump thought his life was over, a voice rang out from the shadows. "Drop your weapons. If you don't, there won't be a second warning." The gunman hesitated, and before he could act, a gunshot rang out. One of the attackers screamed in pain, clutching his hand as blood poured from the wound. Through the chaos, a figure emerged from the darkness, a man who moved faster than anyone could react, his body poised for action. He was alone, facing four armed men, and he was wounded, yet he didn't hesitate. Trump recognized the figure as a Secret Service agent, his savior in that moment. The agent, calm and composed, swiftly pulled Trump to his feet and dragged him through a series of alleys to safety. Blood soaked through the agent's coat, but he showed no sign of slowing down. As Trump tried to ask his name, the agent merely muttered, "Never let them win," before disappearing into the night. It was the last time Trump ever saw him. The next day, he tried to gather information on the agent, asking around, checking with the authorities, but there was nothing. No records, no traces, nothing. It was as if the man had never existed. For years, Trump tried to uncover the identity of the mysterious agent who had saved his life, but every lead came to a dead end. His name had been erased from all records, as if someone had deliberately wiped him from history. Despite the passage of time, the memory of that night remained etched in Trump's mind. The agent's words, "Never let them win," resonated with him deeply, becoming a mantra for Trump as he navigated the world of business and politics. But the question remained, who was this man? Why was he erased from history? And why did no one seem to know anything about him? Determined to find answers, Trump walked into the Secret Service headquarters that fateful day, knowing that the mystery of the agent's identity had to be solved. His search wasn't just about uncovering a hidden truth, it was about acknowledging a hero who had been erased, someone who had sacrificed everything to protect him. And Trump was resolute in his mission, to find the man who saved his life, to restore his name, and to uncover the truth that had been buried for so long. As the search for the mysterious agent continued, Trump's resolve only grew stronger. The name, Shadow One, which the agent had spoken in his last words to Trump, hung in the air like an unsolved riddle. In the years that followed that fateful night in 1982, Trump had never been able to find any trace of the man who had saved him, and the absence of information was both frustrating and unsettling. It wasn't just about finding an agent, it was about discovering the truth behind the disappearance of a hero who had risked his life to protect Trump. That man's name had been erased from history, and Trump had made it his mission to find out why. The absence of any records was baffling. The Secret Service, known for its meticulous documentation, had no file on a man who had been such an integral part of saving a high-profile individual's life. Not even the most basic information about Shadow One existed in the agency's files. In fact, it was as if the agent had never been part of the team at all. This erasure wasn't just accidental, it felt deliberate, as if someone powerful had intentionally wiped away the memory of his existence. But why? What had this agent known that was so dangerous that it had warranted his complete removal from every record? Trump's frustration began to mount as he pressed for answers, yet the only thing he found were more questions. Shadow One was more than just a nickname, it was a symbol of a deeper mystery that seemed to tie into a much larger story, one that was buried so deep that even the most seasoned agents didn't have answers. It was as if the entire country was trying to forget the existence of this agent, someone who had risked everything to protect a man who, at the time, was just a young businessman with no idea of the powerful forces at play in the world of crime and corruption. In a last-ditch effort to uncover the truth, Trump turned to Jonathan Reyes, the director of the Secret Service. Reyes, a seasoned professional who had served under multiple presidents, had encountered many high-stakes situations in his career, but the mystery surrounding Shadow One was unlike anything he had ever faced. It wasn't just about an agent disappearing, it was about uncovering a conspiracy that was bigger than anyone could have imagined. Reyes knew that the truth was buried under layers of secrecy, but he also knew that uncovering it could have serious consequences. Despite the danger, Trump remained insistent. Trump's next step was to track down anyone who might know something about Shadow One. With Reyes's help, he made contact with Michael Hayes, a retired agent who had worked in deep cover operations and had been in the business long enough to know the ins and outs of covert work. Hayes had long since retired from active duty, but his knowledge of the secret world of the Secret Service and its most guarded operations made him a valuable resource. After reaching out, Hayes reluctantly agreed to meet, although he made it clear that opening old wounds could be dangerous for everyone involved. When Trump and Reyes arrived at Hayes's home, a small, weathered house on the outskirts of Washington, they knew they were treading on dangerous ground. Hayes had lived a quiet, reclusive life since his retirement, but the moment he opened the door, the weight of his years in the service seemed to hang over him. There was a caution in his eyes that spoke volumes about the kind of man he had been, and the kind of life he had left behind. Inside, Hayes confirmed what Trump had feared. Shadow One wasn't just an alias, it was the name given to one of the most extraordinary agents the Secret Service had ever known. His real name, Hayes revealed, was David Cole. Cole had worked undercover to infiltrate one of the most powerful criminal syndicates in the country. He had gathered evidence of corruption at the highest levels, but his work had come with a heavy price. As Hayes explained, Cole's discovery of illegal deals between underground organizations and government officials had put him in grave danger. The people he was investigating weren't just criminals, they were powerful individuals who had the ability to make him disappear without a trace. As the conversation progressed, Hayes reluctantly explained how David Cole's life had been completely erased by those in power. When Cole got too close to the truth, he was set up in a staged attack, falsely arrested, and eventually removed from the system. No one was allowed to remember him, and his name was scrubbed from every record. For all intents and purposes, David Cole ceased to exist. Trump's heart sank as he absorbed the weight of this revelation. It wasn't just a man who had saved his life, it was a man who had paid the price for his courage. And now, 40 years later, Trump was determined to make things right. He wasn't just looking for answers anymore. He was on a mission to restore David Cole's name and expose the truth. This was no longer just a search for a forgotten hero, it was about uncovering a system of corruption and ensuring that those who had sacrificed everything for justice were never forgotten. The search for Shadow One was more than a quest for one man's identity, it was a fight for the truth. And Trump, with his determination, was ready to take on the forces that had kept that truth hidden for decades. Trump's search for the mysterious agent who saved his life in 1982 had reached a critical turning point. Armed with new information, he and Reyes were led to an aging, reclusive figure, Michael Hayes. Hayes, once a powerful force in the Secret Service, had retired years earlier, preferring a quiet life away from the shadows of his past. But the weight of what he knew, and the truth about the agent who had saved Trump, was a burden that couldn't be ignored any longer. When they arrived at Hayes's home, it was clear that this was not just another lead, it was the key to unlocking a mystery that had haunted Trump for decades. The house, a small weathered structure in a quiet suburban neighborhood, stood in stark contrast to the secrets it held within. It was clear that Hayes had intentionally lived his life out of sight, keeping away from the public eye. As they approached the door, Trump couldn't help but feel the gravity of the situation. They weren't just dealing with the story of one man's disappearance, they were about to uncover a web of deception that could shake the very foundations of the Secret Service. When Hayes finally opened the door, his gaze was sharp, yet weary. Despite his age, there was an undeniable presence about him, the kind that comes from a life spent in the most high-stakes situations imaginable. He was a man who had seen too much, a man who had witnessed the darkest corners of power. Hayes was reluctant to speak about the past, but he knew that Trump wasn't going to back down. This wasn't just about personal curiosity, it was about justice. And with the truth on the line, Hayes knew he had to tell what he knew. Inside the dimly lit living room, as they exchanged words, Hayes slowly revealed the truth. The agent who had saved Trump's life was none other than David Cole, one of the most legendary undercover agents the Secret Service had ever known. But David Cole wasn't just another agent doing his job. He had gone beyond the call of duty. He had infiltrated one of the most powerful criminal syndicates in the country, gathering critical intelligence on illegal deals involving government corruption. His work had put him on a collision course with some of the most dangerous individuals in America, and it wasn't long before those in power took notice. As Hayes spoke, Trump's mind raced. David Cole wasn't just a hero, he had been a man on the front lines, fighting for justice in a system that didn't always want it. But his actions had come at a cost. Hayes explained that Cole had gathered so much evidence that it threatened to expose deep-rooted corruption that involved both government officials and powerful criminal organizations. This was information no one was ready to hear. And when Cole got too close to the truth, those in charge decided that he had to be erased. It was a covert operation to remove him from the system, just like he had never existed. Shadow One, Hayes explained, wasn't just a code name, it was a designation for someone who had been so deep undercover that he became a ghost. His real name, David Cole, was wiped from the records, and any trace of him was erased from the history books. The people who had orchestrated this knew how dangerous he was. They weren't about to let a man like Cole continue to exist in their world, even if he had saved a future president's life. Trump absorbed everything Hayes said with a quiet intensity. The more he learned about David Cole, the more he realized the enormity of the injustice that had been done. A man who had risked his life for the country, for truth, was erased, his sacrifice made invisible, his legacy buried. It was a story of betrayal at the highest levels, a story that Trump couldn't let stay buried any longer. With this new information, Trump's resolve only strengthened. The search for David Cole was no longer just about finding one man, it was about standing up to a system that had failed him, and countless others, by erasing the legacy of a true hero. David Cole had done something few would ever do, he had put everything on the line to expose corruption, to fight for justice. And now, it was Trump's turn to return the favor. Hayes didn't mince words. He knew the risks involved. If you dig into this, there will be people who don't want you to find the truth. They'll try to stop you, he warned. But Trump didn't flinch. I owe him my life, he said firmly, his eyes burning with determination. No matter what, I will find him, or at least find the truth. Hayes sighed, his eyes reflecting decades of hard-earned wisdom. Then he reached for an old, weathered envelope, sealed in protective plastic. It was the last physical trace of David Cole's existence. Be careful, Hayes cautioned. Some debts are too great to be repaid without consequences. Trump took the envelope, his heart racing. Inside it were photographs, documents, and audio recordings, evidence of Cole's work that had been locked away for decades. And with that, the journey to uncover the truth about David Cole and his heroic actions was set in motion. This wasn't just about a missing man, it was about justice, and Trump was prepared to do whatever it took to make sure that David Cole's legacy was never forgotten. As the investigation into David Cole's disappearance gained momentum, Trump's determination to restore the name of the man who had saved his life only intensified. The sealed envelope containing the last remnants of Cole's existence felt heavy in his hands, and with each piece of evidence inside, the mystery deepened. It was clear now that David Cole was more than just a former Secret Service agent, he had been a whistleblower, someone who had uncovered corrupt ties between criminal organizations and powerful figures within the government. His sacrifice wasn't just personal, it was a sacrifice for justice. And for years, that sacrifice had been buried under a cloak of secrecy, erased as if Cole had never existed at all. Trump's next move was clear, he would bring David Cole's story into the light. He knew that exposing the truth wouldn't be easy. It would mean taking on powerful forces who would stop at nothing to keep their actions hidden. But Trump wasn't one to shy away from a fight, especially not when it involved righting a wrong. He gathered his closest allies, including Reeves, and began working with the intelligence community to piece together the details of Cole's work. Every document, every photo, every recording had to be analyzed. Slowly but surely, they began to uncover the depth of Cole's mission and the peril he had faced. When the time came to make David Cole's story public, Trump knew that it wasn't just about honoring one man, it was about sending a message to the world. It was a message about accountability, about standing up for truth, and about making sure that no one who served this country with honor would ever be forgotten. The press conference that followed would become one of the most significant moments of Trump's career. At the event, Trump stood at the podium with David Cole by his side for the first time in 40 years. The crowd, including members of the press and key figures in government, fell silent as Trump spoke. His voice rang with conviction as he told the room about the man who had sacrificed everything to fight corruption, only to be erased from history. He spoke not only of Cole's bravery but of the systemic injustice that had allowed such a thing to happen. David Cole was a hero, Trump declared. He fought against corruption, against evil, and when he got too close to the truth, they made him disappear. But today, I stand here to tell you that David Cole will not be forgotten. The words echoed through the room, and for the first time in decades, David Cole was finally given the recognition he deserved. The applause that followed was not just for Cole, it was for every person who had ever been silenced by those in power, every person whose story had been buried by a system more interested in maintaining control than seeking justice. In the days that followed, Trump took things a step further by signing an executive order to award David Cole the Presidential Medal of Freedom, one of the highest honors a U.S. citizen could receive. The ceremony held at the Secret Service headquarters was historic. It wasn't just a moment of celebration, it was a moment of vindication. The walls of the headquarters were adorned with David Cole's name, alongside other agents who had dedicated their lives to protecting the nation. The long-overdue recognition marked a new chapter not only for David but for every hero who had ever gone unnoticed or unappreciated. Trump also established the David Cole Foundation, a scholarship fund dedicated to supporting former agents and their families in times of hardship. The foundation quickly gained traction, with donations pouring in from corporations, individual supporters, and the government. This was the beginning of a larger movement, a movement that honored the sacrifices of all those who had worked tirelessly behind the scenes to protect the country, no matter the personal cost. David Cole's legacy, once erased from history, was now woven into the very fabric of the nation. His story had sparked a movement of justice, one that reminded people of the importance of acknowledging those who sacrificed for the greater good. And for Trump, this was only the beginning. By fighting for David Cole's recognition, Trump had started something far bigger, an effort to ensure that no one would ever again be forgotten, especially those who had given everything for the country. David Cole's story didn't just end with his recognition, it sparked something much larger, something that would reverberate through the country for years to come. The establishment of the David Cole Foundation was the next step in honoring his legacy. Trump's decision to create a scholarship fund to support former agents and their families in need was not just symbolic, it was a concrete action designed to address the ongoing challenges faced by those who serve and sacrifice for the country. The foundation quickly gained traction, with individuals, businesses, and even government organizations rallying behind it. People saw the importance of ensuring that those who had dedicated their lives to protecting others didn't fall through the cracks once their service was over. The movement didn't stop there. The attention surrounding David Cole's story shone a spotlight on the countless other men and women who had given their all to defend the country, only to be forgotten by a system that moved on without them. The foundation became a beacon of hope for those who had been left behind. Through donations, community involvement, and new initiatives, the foundation worked to provide housing, healthcare, education, and other essential resources to veteran families and former agents. It quickly grew into a nationwide campaign that transcended political lines, reminding Americans of their shared responsibility to care for those who had given so much for their freedom. David Cole's name was no longer erased from history, it was now a symbol of the country's commitment to justice, accountability, and the idea that no one who had sacrificed for the greater good would ever be forgotten again. What began as a search for one man's identity turned into a movement that reshaped the way America viewed its heroes. It wasn't just about remembering the past, it was about ensuring that the future would never forget the sacrifices made to protect the nation. David Cole's story is more than just a tale of a forgotten hero, it's a powerful reminder that justice, accountability, and gratitude should never be taken for granted. His disappearance, and the system that erased him, revealed a dark side of power that too often goes unchallenged. But the determination of those who refused to let his sacrifice go unnoticed sparked a movement that can't be ignored. This story teaches us that every individual, no matter their position or background, has a right to be recognized for their actions and contributions. The impact of David Cole's story goes far beyond just one person's recognition, it's about rethinking how we treat those who serve and sacrifice for the greater good. In a world where power can sometimes silence the truth, we have to be brave enough to stand up for what's right, even when it's not easy or convenient. The truth doesn't always come without a fight, but when we push through, we pave the way for a more just society. It's a call to action for all of us, reminding us that sometimes the smallest acts of courage, like David Cole's, can change the course of history. The legacy of David Cole is one of perseverance and integrity. It serves as a testament to the power of standing up for the truth, even when it means going against those in power. And it teaches us that no matter how dark the world may seem, there is always a way to bring light. We may not always have the chance to be heroes in the way David Cole was, but we all have a responsibility to ensure that the sacrifices of those who came before us are never forgotten. Their stories are our stories, and it's up to us to keep them alive.